to all 6 billion humans without insulting any faith, political belief, sex, customs. I mean, when you take something that's going to unify an entire planet because it's correct, remember, no one ever went to war over a math problem, and all 6 billion humans use the same mathematical syntax. But how many different languages? You've got 5,000 different religions, you've got 5,000 different languages, and it keeps everyone divided, called Babel, where even though they have all this Babel for 8,500 years, they still use the same math problem, and they don't fight over it. So by bringing communication skills down to a math problem, we remove the ability of an individual to lose his temper or maintain an argument. And with that said, you got a question?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. Maybe preempting this a little bit here now, but if the syntaxing is or can be considered such a threat to the status quo,
the illusion, yeah, to the fiction, right?
Entity, how come you're still around and it's still around?
Every seminar that question's been asked at all 940 seminars. Why am I still walking around? Well, that's an easy question. Now, I believe in the time-space continuum. I mean, we had a past. Everyone's been around for 50 years, 60 years now, right? And if we said to you 50 years ago what was going to happen today, 50 years in the future, would you believe 50 years was going to be here from the past? Do you believe that the Earth will be here 50 years from now? Well, we can only hope, right? Nobody knows what the future is. Nobody knows what the past is. But then, look at where we came in the last 100 years with technology. I mean, this little unit here has more memory capacity and does more gadgets than every household computer just 5 years ago. And that's a little handheld device. We watch TV on it, communicate with everything. In December of 2009, the biggest computer capacity in microcircuitry was 200,000 transistors to a head of a pin. In January 10, it was 2 gigabyte, 2 billion transistors on the head of a pin. And where's it going to be down the road? Well, a 1/4-inch green holographic laser in quartz crystal will create a 600 gig RAM with a 64 terabyte hard drive. And that's only a 1/4-inch quartz crystal. Make it bigger, and you can exponentialize itself. How small is small? How much information can you fit into a tiny area? How much information can you write on the electron of a hydrogen atom? You know, and then recover it to build technology of such things. So my thing is that people in the future, through technology, if man does get to a certain point, will eventually break the time-space continuum and be able to time travel. Now, if syntax in communications is responsible for the future of mankind on a timeline of 1 million timelines, and only the timeline of correctness will get to that future. And that future is where the timeline is certified. That timeline will have to guarantee that syntax in the creator of the math interface stays safe and brings this program to its full conclusion. So if anybody tries to kill me, they're just going to come back before. And they're going to remove that individual. Mom and dad won't meet. Instead of making a left-hand turn, he's going to make a right-hand turn, never meets his wife, doesn't create the seed that creates the person that commits the suicide. You get the point? In other words, the possibilities, I make the statement, the person that would harm me doesn't exist. Because the success, give me an idea. I'm 18 years old, and I'm out rabbit hunting with my brother. I'm leaning up against an oak tree, and I'm playing with a 20-gauge shotgun shell, and I dropped it. Well, as I bent over to pick it up, a 30-30 slug split the back of my jacket open, buried itself in an oak tree. Did I drop the pen, or was it knocked out of my hand? How do you change the time-space continuum? without changing the time-space continuum and disrupting things. Or I'm sitting in my office and there's a shift. And you're looking at everything, but everything shifts just slightly, maybe just an inch. But it happens like that. And then you look at your watch and 5 hours has gone past. Where'd the time go? What happened in that space? Did my house blow up? Was I killed? Did they reset the clock, but they missed it by just a second? Enough that my consciousness would be aware that there was a change? And you have that happen hundreds of times over the last 30 years. You start asking questions that I'm being watched. There's events that take place. I've missed so many planes at the airports. And every time I miss a plane, I'm sitting next to somebody who I would have never met, who missed their plane, who I would have never met. But that person is relevant to the time-space continuum of bringing information out in the world. Just like I told you the story about Mrs. Helm. Any of you remember the Freeman standoff in Montana in 1995? There was over 100 FBI agents trying to make these guys surrender and come off their land. The Freeman standoff. Right after, and then after that, Ruby Ridge took place. I was the guy that wrote the lawsuit against Peterson, Clark, and Schweitzer against 100 FBI agents for breaking. And the compound that these guys were in was a hole in the United States. It wasn't the United States of America. It was an old Indian treaty that was never brought into the country, and they lived in a hole, and the FBI couldn't trespass into that hole. And one of the things that no one knows about, the military brought in two 108 howitzers, put them in a gravel pit 125 feet deep, evacuated everyone for an area of 8 miles around the gravel pit. The military did. The gravel pit was located roughly 40 miles from the compound. The intention was that they were going to throw 2 shells 20 miles up in the air at midnight, dark of the moon, and they were going to fall down and blow a hole 100 feet wide and 50 feet deep on top of the compound. End of the story. I was called up when I was in Hawaii to come and get these guys out safely. So I sent in a 6-hour audio tape, just a cassette, explaining syntax to these guys. And they came out dancing and surrendering to the FBI because they knew there was no rules, regulations, or codes once they saw syntax. They didn't get, my job was to keep them alive. The shells never went off. Everything got bottled up and taken away. We had enough people that witnessed the cannons being placed in and what the rules and regulations were, of how they were going to eliminate the threat, which never took place. So there was cause and effect. And when I was supposed to do a radio broadcast in Cat Creek, Montana, all 4 radio stations were dynamited. Just moments before the broadcast was to take place. So we called up a radio station 250 miles away on telephone, and we still did a 2-hour broadcast explaining syntax and how the FBI had no rules, regulations, or codes to invade where they were and what the treaties were. These are all different events. These are one of just hundreds of stories I have of events where I've interfered with around the world when I travel and saved people's lives. And I could burn up the whole seminar telling you stories about things I've done in lawsuits and saving people's lives, but that's not what we're here for today. Now, during break, we had a little discussion. I told this young lady that at all my seminars, I do this. I'm going to define the word God. Everybody goes, how can you take religion? And everyone in this room has a different faith and talk about religion in a mixed community. Okay? There's a thing that we use a triangle to explain this. We all want correctness. Because this here is your truth. Now, when you believe that you are correct and you have truth, you will make contract. And as you are all taught throughout your entire life, you will always honor those contracts you make. And there you find your God. Okay, now, so what is God? Well, God is we all want to know who the Creator is. We all want to know what the origin is of our beliefs. Every person in this room has 1,000 independent definitions. You've read books, you've talked with your parents, your friends, your relatives, your church, you've explored your own dreams as who God is. So everyone in this room has an independent 1,000 different definitions to fulfill these 3 terms to come to what this definition is, and it's unique to you and you alone. And no matter, you can go to any church, and the minister is going to tell you one definition, but then if you ask, what did this man say to me just now? What did the priest say, or the minister, or the rabbi say? And you're going to get 100 different definitions of what people heard, because they are using their own life experience to do what's called subjective interpretation of what was just said to them. Now, it says in all the religions that God created man in his image. And the synonym of image is imagination, creation, art. And so all the terminologies that you absorb throughout your life are to define one thing: the difference between good, which you classify God in creation, and evil, which is destruction, and bad things. You have to learn about bad, and you have to learn about good. It's called perspective. So you know the difference between right and wrong. We choose to be good because it's a better form of life. Those that are bad and don't live in our society as bad, we put them in jail, and they get penalized. So we spend our entire life searching for one definition of this word. And everyone, all 6 billion humans on planet Earth, have a different 1,000 definitions than the person standing next to them. And it's unique to you and you alone. That's what your faith is. And all the stories that I am told as to what this word is defined at, I have never heard 2 stories the same in all my travels and all the people I've talked with. So your ability to read, understand, subjectively translate information in your mind and come up with a conclusion to be good is what you have to do when you look in the mirror in the morning and you say, you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be an honorable person. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to love my children, take care of my family, and I'm not going to go out and do evil and hurt people. And that's basically the bottom line of where we are. So who is God? God is the creation of your thoughts and the information you have. Hold a thought in your hand. Show me the 3-dimensional object of a thought. Hold God in your hand. Show me the 3-dimensional object of your God. It comes from your thought and all the information that you have absorbed. What we're doing here in syntax is we're showing you that the Bible is written in the Quran, in the Jewish Bible, and all of these different communications worldwide are written in adverb verb. They've left the words out. Why do they leave the words out? Because they can control you. So by learning syntax, you can go back and put the missing words in. In now time, you can remove the prefixes and the suffixes, which are the past and the future, and go to the root words. Then find a root word that means now time information, not the future, not a word that means no contract. So if you go through any Bible phrase and you see a word that starts with a vowel and 2 consonants, get a book of synonyms, look up all the synonyms, and go ahead and list those down and put those in, and then put the correct prepositional phrase in front of that word. You will learn how to build a sentence correctly from that phrase. Now, in my books and on my website, I have the Lord's Prayer. And the Lord's Prayer has been syntaxed. One of my students stands up and says, I don't like the way you wrote that. I says, good, here's a book on synonyms. Replace any noun you want in the Lord's Prayer with any other synonym that is coordinated with that, and you will create a new Lord's Prayer. And then you got to read it backwards using the opposite preposition. And whether you read it frontwards or backwards, it will still say the same thing, and you can write 10,000 Lord's Prayers, and they will all say the same thing. Now, you show me a technology that you can write the same thing 10,000 different ways and it never changes its meaning. That is unique. Just like you can't change a math problem. It's either right or it's wrong. There is no, well, it's almost there, or it's almost right. You want to get down to the crux of what is correct. That is where you want to be, in a correct position. And that's why this technology scares the courts. Because no law, which is a negative condition, is the only thing that gets, and no fact is the only thing that gets tried in court. Remember, the sign says no parking. No is an adverb, modifies the verb parking, and they put a box around it. So it's an enclosed area and can't be considered because it was a lie in the first place. And no is a negative condition, so how do you no park? You can't create a negative condition of state. Where's my fact? How can I pay a fine for a no fact? Well, I'm going to use a Federal Reserve note. Re meaning no is serve. So I have a negative condition of payment for a negative condition of violation and a negative condition of court for a negative condition of law. So therefore I have one condition of nothing. So therefore it's voluntary compliance. And to make sure you volunteer to comply with negative, we put a gun to your head and say, choose. Right? You all been there and done that. Everybody's got a parking ticket at least once in your life. If you guys have such things here in Australia. But that's my that's my terminology of finding out what you know about what the difference between good and evil is. There's 5,000 names for God. But there's an infinite amount of ways to subjectively interpret how to get to that belief. But the bottom line is, you're either good or you're evil, right? You got two choices. It's a plus and minus. There is no gray area. There is no stand in the middle and be zero. I did a theology seminar for 47 ministers from 16 different religions. One man stands up and says, I'm an atheist. And of course, all the other ministers, they do the little hum, you know. I'm going, yeah, but in the morning when you wake up, you stand in front of a mirror and you say, I believe in me. I don't believe in anything else in the world. I says, while you're believing in you, I says, do you have specific rules and regulations that you're going to conduct yourself as an atheist? He says, yes. I says, and you go out there to be a good person, aren't you? He says, yes, I am a good person. And you know the difference between good and evil, don't you? As an atheist, he goes, yes, I do. I said, well, guess what? You made a choice between good and evil. You have faith. I says, your faith may not have a definition that correlates with the other 47 men in here, but you have faith just the same, and you make choices. Remember the movie Matrix? Yeah. When Keanu Reeves, Neo, is in the room with the 100 TVs? The architect. And the architect is having a conversation with him. And what does Neo say? He says, it's all about choice. And you make choices every day. Left or right, up or down, in or out. And you're going to make your choices every day to be good or evil. And if you know what syntax is, you can make a mathematical choice. You have better pieces of information to make better decisions to be good. And then if somebody with evil wants to come at you with an illusion called adverb verb, you can say, that's a lie, and I can prove it. And that's the one thing that what happened in front of Wasilewski back in 1985. Wasilewski said, you can't prove that I lied to you. I says, you know what? You're right. I can't prove that. He says, I know you're wrong. He says, yes. He says, I'm wrong. He says, but you can't prove it. He says, when you can prove that I'm wrong, he says, I'll give you what you want. And that's what changed everything. And I went out and I found out how to do it correct. so I could prove it. I have a signed confession for all 4,000 judges that I removed from the bench and 2,200 attorneys. Signed confession. That's the only way I can do what I do, and I'm the only guy on planet Earth that prosecutes judges and attorneys.
I've got another one for you.
You do? Oh, another judge, of course. Everybody has one. You know, I'll ask the question, who has the worst court system in Australia? And of course, everybody's hand goes up. And that's because people don't agree with what they know. But the judges have to take special courses in deductive reasoning. We have to look at you when you come before us, what your volition was to be here, what kind of game you want to play. Now, this is a story that happened in Seattle, Washington. The man comes to court, and the judge gets into a discussion with him, and he says, I have all the facts, Your Honor. The judge says, oh, you have all the facts. He says, you have 30 days to bring all the facts back to this courtroom to make your argument before this court. And the judge, or I'm going to put you in jail for 6 months. And when he says, well, what do you mean by all the facts? The judge says, all the facts. And this is dealing with a traffic case. He says, but that's to do all. He says, that would be thousands of pages. He says, you're the one that said you have all the facts. He says, I'm just making sure that you know what you're talking about. Choose your words. So the first thing this guy does is he calls me up and walking. He goes, hey, Dave, he says, I just put my foot in my mouth and I just told the judge I have all the information to come to court. And the judge called me on it and he says, he's going to put me in jail for perjury if I don't bring all the facts to court. He says, what am I going to do? I says, practice doing handstands. He goes, practice doing handstands? I says, yes. That's the riddle. That's the solution to the riddle. I says, and when you go to court, you go in there and you pop a handstand for the judge. And he says, your feet are dangling in the sea of space and you brought all the facts to court today, which is planet Earth and all the facts. So he walks into court 30 days later and the judge says, are you here to go to court? And he says, yes, I am. And he comes in there. The judge says, well, where's all your paper? Where's all the facts you're going to bring here today? He says, you ordered me to bring all the facts to court. And he pops a handstand for him. The judge says, what are you doing? He says, I'm bringing all the facts to court today. He says, my feet are dangling in the sea of space and I brought planet Earth to court today in the well of the court. He says, you ordered me to bring all the facts. I did so. He says, that's the only right answer. He says, case dismissed. Free to go. See, sometimes it's about subjective interpretation. And you have to read between the lines. Okay. Moving forward, we're going to go through the courtroom procedures. Now, a courtroom is divided into 5 different sections. And most people don't even know they're in this elaborate illusion. Some courtrooms only have 2 planes, but you will have a plane. And the judge, and when I get done explaining this, I'll tell you a little story. The judge sits on the top plane, so he is removed, and he's in a box. And he has his flag or his seal on his box, which means he is an independent jurisdiction. He can neither see you, hear you, or have any jurisdiction. He is an actor in black robes. Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 44.1. It's the only place where it is found it says judge is an actor. So the clerk of the courts, however, sits on plane number 1 in most courtrooms. Up until the time I put this presentation up here and blew the secret on clerks, they then took the clerks off of the same plane as the claimant in the basilee. A basilee is a servant employee of the courtroom, which is your prosecuting attorney, and you are the claimant. Don't call yourself a respondent, because re means no speak. Defendant means no contract. So don't get involved with no contract language. So the clerk was then moved off of plane number 1 into its own separate plane. When you take the witness stand, you're going to go ahead and you're going to move yourself from the common, and you're going to put yourself into a box. And in that box, the witness cannot hear evidence or give evidence and cannot produce any testimony. So it's mute argument. The jury box is on a different plane as well. And the jury box, when you look it up in Black's Law Dictionary, says this is an enclosed area that cannot see witnesses or hear testimony. Yep. Read it for yourself. It's all been published. They're in a box, aren't they? Which is an enclosed area. And therefore, there's no continuance of evidence between the jury, the judge, the claimant, the vassallee, or the clerk. The whole thing is all mute. Everybody is talking to nobody. The contracts are written in adverb verb. Nothing is being contracted, nothing is being said. And what did I tell you about what is the court? The court is the document. The Constitution are the words on the document. If the Constitution is written in adverb verb, and I swear to support the Constitution of the United States, between two people who said nothing about nothing on nothing, in a closed area of nothing, without a postage stamp and without a flag to establish jurisdiction, I've got nothing going in and nothing's coming out. How much money you got? Well, it's $275 an hour to talk, and you have freedom of speech at $275 an hour, and as soon as your money runs out, we will make a decision. We are practicing banking and commerce, and no matter what you think is happening, it never happened. Then you get to file an appeal if you don't like what nothing happened. How do you spell appeal? APP, which means no contract. And what does the word appeal means? It means the higher court will forgive the lower court for doing nothing about nothing with nobody and agree with it, unless it is something that will affect public opinion about how the court system operates, some genocide or apartheid case. Then they'll go ahead and they'll make a little bit of noise about it. And like everybody knows O.J. Simpson, right? That was a $40 million trial, and it ran for like 9 months. That was a big joke for the simple reason that they had to go ahead and take somebody and do an elaborate advertisement to the world about how our justice system works. That's all that was, just advertisement. And since then we have, what, 20 or 30 different crime shows on TV that advertise and tell you what's going on. But that's not the real world. It really doesn't happen. Maybe one case out of 1,000 they might take and run a CSI on, but most of 99% of the time they just fluff it off. They don't have time or money to go ahead and chase it. So it all comes down to who you are, what you know, and what you put on your documents that come into court. I can write on a document, one of my syntax documents, file it into court and put one line in there, I want hot coffee on my table. Now the courtroom door says no food or beverages. And yet, when I sit down at my table, I will have a pot of hot coffee because I like to drink coffee. And I have a contract that I paid filing fees for to have hot coffee on my table, and that contract says that I'm going to have hot coffee, just to prove a point that that contract has jurisdiction in the court. Try it. I guarantee you'll get it. You say, Your Honor, so what? Court's out of order. I don't have my hot coffee. I put it in my contract. Bailiff, go get this man his hot coffee. It's part of his contract. Do it. You'll have fun. So these planes are who you are. I mean, breaks it up and creates the illusion. Now you can dissolve the planes and dissolve all the boxes by writing it in your document. Your lawsuit says there are no planes in this court. We are on a level playing field. We're going to use syntax language. There is no adverb verb illusions. And what we say is not 2 + 2 = 4. And you do a disclaimer of that. Or you do it, not a disclaimer, you do a claimer. Or closure is the word, closure. All maritime law, under maritime law, all contracts must have closure. Well, when you're in a syntax level of mathematics, believe me, you have a closure. Our documents, because we've had through trial and error, and we're up to 2,200 federal lawsuits in the last 15 years, we are at a level where we take into consideration all these different points of closure that are necessary. When the Supreme Court of Hawaii wanted to sell 1.2 million acres of Hawaiian homelands without lodial title, as the king, I was responsible to stop it. So I took the 50-page document